Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Commission meeting of September 5th, 2023. I call this meeting to order and will note for the record a quorum of the commissioners present. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to silence your cell phones. And if you plan to speak this morning at public comment, if you just would sign in the sign-in sheet over in the corner, that way you won't have to say your address out loud. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd consider a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Is there anyone from the public here today who'd like to comment on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none. Are there any requests from the commission to remove items from the consent agenda? Once again, seeing none, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Benega.
Aye.
Kipley.
Aye.
Karski.
Aye.
Weinberg.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to regular business. The first item is a public hearing to consider the spending plan for the 2023 Burn JAG program. Good morning, Joe Bosman.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joe Bosman, Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office. This morning was an opportunity for the public to weigh in and have any comments or questions they may have on our 2023 Burn JAG program. The JAG stands for Justice Assistance Grant. This is a joint effort between Minnehaha County and the City of Sioux Falls, where both the police department and the sheriff's office get allocated a certain number of dollars from the federal government to be used for law enforcement purposes. As such, we come up with a plan, a spending plan for how to use those dollars, and we also have required to have a period of public comment for the spending plan if anybody would like to comment on that. So today is the date and time that we have designated and posted notice a couple weeks ago that if anybody would like to have comments from the audience, the crowd, we'd be more than happy to help answer any questions they may have.
All right. Well, we've heard from the proponents. Are there any opponents? Anybody who has any opposition to the plan that's been put forward? If not, I'll turn it over to the commission.
Move for approval. Second. That's a memo. Are we approving this?
Yes, I believe we're approving the spending plan.
Well, so the interlocal agreement was approved last time. This time is just more or less just merely facilitate the time and the place for a public hearing. I don't think there's any action required on this agenda item.
Seems odd with a public hearing that there wouldn't be any action. Any comment from our state's attorney? Okay, thanks.
If you, I suppose if you would like to make a motion to approve the spending plan, that would be something that could be
Yeah,
actionable.
I think that makes sense to me. So I can't
That would be
remember
my
now.
motion.
Okay, now we have a motion to approve the spending plan and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, that takes us to item 11, which is the fiscal year 2024 budget hearing. Susan Beeman, good morning.
Good morning, Susan Beeman with the Auditor's Office. Today we're here to do the public hearing on the provisional budget that was published at the end of July. There's been a few changes from that provisional budget. I'll kind of go through the cover letter and then we'll briefly go through the attachments that were to that. One thing to keep in mind, we usually do have general fund changes and a number of other changes related to centrally assessed utility values. Due to the timing of when that file came from the state, it comes on the fourth Monday. Actually, they don't send us to us until the fourth Monday of August, which was just last week. It takes us a number of days to push that data and that information through our system. So we don't have that data yet. So those changes are not going to be incorporated today. You will see that on the 19th when I come back to have the final briefing before the end of September for you to see those changes. So just note that that's a little different than prior years, and it's all a timing thing of when we get the data from the state. For general fund, what you will see for changes at this time are $31,534 in grant revenue for the state's attorney related to the Victims Witness Assistant grant that was funded through the state. And then additionally for appropriations, there were a number of things related to salary and benefit changes for the elections department, as well as the state's attorney budget related to that grant-funded position. Additionally, we had a few changes to workers' compensation in the jail and the sheriff's office just due to changes in estimates from our carrier. Those were the two major changes or the larger changes for work comp. The other budgets were very minor, so we are not recommending changing those at this time. Additionally, you will see a change for a rural access fund. That is a relatively new funding source through the state. That was just inadvertently excluded from the provisional budget. You'll see that the revenue is $480,000, an estimate from the state, as well as appropriations of $480,000 from this that we would be allocating out. Again, that is all within the rural access fund. We've covered a number of these budget items in the past, but on the remaining of on the briefing memo, you'll see that we, again, have an additional $1.5 million of opt-out included in the 2024 budget. That is from the 2019 opt-out that was passed. Additionally, you have your 18 new positions that were approved that we have previously discussed. I won't go through the details of those, that those are still the same as what we've gone through in previous sessions. If you can scroll down a little bit more, this just shows the changes between provisional budget and the current version. So you can see just general fund and rural access fund have been changed. The changes to general fund changed the cash applied slightly. We're still, after the grant funding that we have discussed, we're still at about a 3.5% cash applied rate after that one-time grant funding is factored in. And then this is the overall means of finance. And again, these are the changes, incorporate the changes for the general fund as well as rural access fund. All other funds remain the same.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Susan? I'm going to open it up for public comment here in a second. All right. So opportunity for, or this is a public hearing, so we've heard from the proponents. Are there any opponents to the budget? Anybody who'd like to speak in opposition to the information that was presented? You may come forward to the mic if you'd like. If you just please give your name, that'd be
I
great.
signed the list in the back. My name's Robert Harms from Del Rapids.
Thank you.
And I'm really more of a commentator and not an opponent. I know the budget, but the comment I want to emphasize is that I'm not in favor of using opt-outs for routine funding of the general fund of the county. I think there's should be enough property tax base and new construction and increase to be able to fund the budget needs. I know there's, in the budgeting process, there's lots of requests from all sources looking for county funds, and it's hard to say no, but I think you need to say no and stay within the mill levies and not use the opt-out. I think the flavor of the opt-out when it was first initiated was for unexpected or special types of needs in a public budget, such as a new program start out for a few years or a building need or a equipment need, and not for routine funding. I know it's kind of evolved into that because counties are pressed. I do have some experience with budgeting. I served on the Del Rapids School Board for 15 years, and I was president for 9 years. So the other thing in Minnehaha County, it's hard to get enough signatures to oppose an opt-out, whereas in a less populated county, it's easy to get those 5% signatures. And so some of the less populated counties are having votes on the opt-out, but with the population the size of Minnehaha County, it's tough. And then one final thing is I think the more you have to be very careful about funding programs because you can create dependency of a lot of people on public funds. And so sometimes the best way to help a person is to just tell them no and let them figure out a way to help themselves. And I know so that's the hard part of budgeting, and I know you have to do it and get lots of requests, but I really don't think we ought to be using the opt-out. I know you had a task force this spring that studied your budgeting process, and one of the recommendations was to use the opt-out funding. I shuddered when I read that in the newspaper because I said, oh no, that's not a good pathway to go down. So that's the comment I wanted to make. I just would like you to not use the opt-out for general funding. And if you need to go to the legislature and say, you know, we need our mill levy changed or something like that, then that can happen. But thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition to the budget? Well, as rebuttal, Susan, if you could just come forward and talk a little bit about our opt-out. I know we've had a number of public hearings where we've talked about this and the issues that we've had and the inability that we've had to get the legislature to adjust our mill levies. So.
Certainly. I don't think any of us like the idea of having to do opt-outs. I think the reality is there's a couple of factors that are primary as part of this, especially one of them is especially in the last couple of years. Inflation was 8.5% is what the number is from the state. As far as CPI and the property tax formula, we're capped at 3%. So right there's a 5% deficit that we're dealing with, 5.5% deficit that we're dealing with. So the formula set by the state, although can work in many cases, in these cases of rising inflation, it creates a very big challenge for us. Secondly, the additional issue is growing public safety costs. In one of our previous meetings, we talked about a 47% increase in the last 5 years in public safety costs. That is across all funds, not just general fund, but one of the key things that we're dealing with now is planning for the expansion in the jail for having to add more staffing. So that is going to add millions of dollars of expenses in the upcoming years that we need to be prepared for. So I would say those are the two key primary things that are creating issues for us, where general fund opt-outs is what we're needing to do.
All right, thank you.
If I-
Commissioner Karski.
Susan, remind me, what percent of our budget goes to discretionary items that we can say yes or no to?
Roughly 10%.
Less than 10?
And I probably say 10% very loosely in the sense that it's things that also benefit the community as well. It's going to be some of the donations to the nonprofits and things like that in our community. It's things like that. So
Okay. I thought it was even less than 2%, but
I don't believe so off of what we had for the van committee.
and maybe I'm confusing the line between what the state statutes say we can spend money on, like the fairgrounds, versus have to spend money on, like we give money to the Compass Center and to Children's Home, which comes from different funding sources.
There are those. There's the musts, and then that you
The
can,
may.
and then there's those scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions for Susan? Well, I would turn it over to the commission and just remind everybody that there will be one more hearing, final hearing, or final
There will be
adoption.
There will be one final briefing on the 19th with a final adoption on the final meeting in September. So on the 19th, I'll bring back the centrally assessed utility value information. That will be the primary change that you will see. That will touch many funds, but then that'll also affect appropriations. So for example, the rural fire will increase revenue, but then we'll also increase expenses related to that as well, as because we'll pay out that increase to those rural fire departments. So that will be the primary change you'll see on the 19th. Otherwise, the majority of this will stay the same. And then the final adoption will be at the last meeting in September.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Yep.
that reminder. All right. Comments, questions? This budget's a long process. Started back early in the beginning of the year when Commissioner Karski kind of headed up the Financial Action Network, and we had a bunch of community people, mainly folks with finance backgrounds, come in and take a hard look at our budget and make recommendations about things that we can improve. And I think almost all of those we have looked at hard and have incorporated or plan to incorporate in some way. And I really want to thank Susan and the whole auditor's office and the commission officers, the hard work that has gone to bring us to this point. And so we will wrap this up in the end of the month. Commissioner Karski.
Just follow-on comment to that. You know, the Financial Action Network is a 5-year look ahead. And in the next 5 years, I mean, I think our current budget is funded at, what, 26% opt-out dollars? And we'll probably be up to 32, 33% in the next 5 years funding with opt-out dollars. We've been to the legislature every legislative session asking for changes to the way the mill levies were calculated back in 1992 or 1993, and been denied that. And the answer from legislators repeatedly is, you have opt-outs, use them. That's what we're doing. So it's not ideal, but it's the only solution we have at this point, and I'm always willing to talk to anybody who has more insights, so please let me know.
Right, anyone else? Okay, so this is a public hearing where we have no action to take. So if there are no other comments, we will go ahead and move forward to item 12, which is to authorize the chair to sign a subrecipient agreement with the South Dakota Department of Social Services for medication assisted treatment in the county jail. Warden Mattson, good morning.
Good morning, Warden Mike Mattson from the Minnehaha County Jail. I'm requesting that the commission approve and authorize the chair to sign the attached agreement between Minnehaha County Jail and the South Dakota Department of Social Services so we can continue funding for our medication assisted treatment program. The language in the contract is the same, it's just a new term. We utilize this program for people in custody that qualify for medication assisted treatment. This is how hours of the provider and the assessment people and then the medication itself is funded through this program.
Questions for Warden Mattson? All right, if not, is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Benega.
Aye.
Kipley.
Aye.
Blindberg.
Aye.
Karski.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item 13, which is to authorize the chair to sign the contract with Turner County for inmate housing. Warden Mattson.
Again, Mike Mattson from the Minnehaha County Jail. Requesting the commission approve and the chair to sign the Turner County housing contract. This is normally I do these in November-ish. I didn't get a return, and they had called me and said, hey, could we house one of our people at the Minnehaha County Jail? And I said, that'd be great, but we don't have a contract yet. Here's the contract. And since we were at this time of year, I decided to incorporate it this year's and next year's. So this is a 16-month term, and it reflects the increased bed rate of $112 that starts on January 1st, 2024.
Any questions for the warden? So looking at these rates, do we make a whole lot of money when we house people from other counties?
No.
These just really reflect our true costs, correct?
Yes. This is this rate is done in conjunction with the auditor's office. Susan helps out immensely with this, and there's a huge formula, multiple spreadsheets, and it's really complicated. She understands it more than I do, so I'm very thankful for her help on that.
It's always good to have good teammates, right?
Yep.
All right. Is there anyone for public comment on this item today? And I just asked you that question just because I think most people, if they're not paying attention, are just would be astounded that that's what it costs to have somebody in our jail for one night. And that's what Minnehaha County taxpayers are paying when somebody is incarcerated as well. So, all right. If there aren't any other comments by the commission, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor? Oh, no, roll call vote, please.
Karski.
Aye.
Blindberg.
Aye.
Benega.
Aye.
Kipley.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye, motion passes unanimously.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right, that takes us to item 14, which is a briefing on the progress of the Minnehaha County Radio Infrastructure Upgrade Project. Joe Bosman.
Hello, Commissioners, again. Joe Bosman, Sheriff's Office. It's been 1 year since the Commission authorized the Sheriff's Office to begin our radio infrastructure upgrade using ARPA money. I'm going to drive with the little slideshow here real quick to kind of give you an update, but I figured after 1 year, let you know where we're at. It is a substantial project that is taking some time. There's many moving parts with it. But what it's really we're talking about is on the screen, you'll see that there's two different radios that we utilize in the first responder world. You have your portable radio, which is the one that you have on your belt on your person, and your mobile radio, which is built into your car. The radio coverage map for our portables is the one that we are needing to address with increased coverage needs. On the map, anything shaded in blue showed approximate good coverage on that portable, the smaller radio. Anything not shaded in blue is considered a poor or non-receptive area for portable coverage. Meaning that if our deputies show up to a call anywhere in that non-shaded area, as soon as they get out of their car and they try to communicate to other responders or Metro Communications, it's pretty much not happening. So we recognize that, and you folks recognize that as well, and said, yes, let's increase our coverage by adding some towers in the county to shade in those areas and get better coverage. Doing so means that we're going to utilizing existing structures throughout the county, the Garrettson water tank, the Colton water tower, KKLS tower way there on the west side of the county, and then a tower owned by the city of Sioux Falls just west of Baltic. The one that's shown that it's not supposed to be blown down, but it's gone now, and that one's going to be reconstructed by Metro Communications just by the Hartford area. So what we're doing with all these sites is utilizing existing sites, partnerships with those communities that they will benefit with it as well. These fire departments and all those jurisdictions utilize our same radio infrastructure network. So they are very eager and excited to have increased coverage for when they go and fight fires or the ambulance response to medical emergencies. So a recap, we signed a purchase agreement with Motorola December of 2022 for that's the equipment that goes into the structures on the site. That is probably the heaviest lift of the cost for this project is with the Motorola radio equipment at each site. Right now that equipment is being built in Chicago at Motorola's staging facility. After it's done being built and tested, they package it, crate it, send it out to Minnehaha County where it will stay here until we finish getting our little site structure fortified buildings on each site ready to go. Those are estimated to ship here probably around the end of the year for the Motorola equipment. We are continuing to have biweekly phone calls with Motorola and the state of South Dakota for project updates. State of South Dakota has done a very good job of being a valuable partner to us. They kind of more or less manage a lot of the back end of the system, the network, the electronics, communications. So they're in partnership with us where we are getting the equipment, the sites, getting it all plugged in, ready to go, and then they will help us make sure that it's working properly once we get to that point. So right now we also are working on site agreements with all the different tower owners, being that they are the owners of said structures and we are putting our antennas on them, our transmit and receive antennas, as well as a small little fortified concrete shelter that's on the bottom to house the backup generator, the costly Motorola electronics on the ground base to make sure the antennas work. Talking about those shelters, those tower site communication shelters, 4 of those sites need to have these small secure structures that will house the radio equipment and the backup generator power. Mark Krins with Facilities, also heavily involved with this project, valuable partner for us, really appreciate having him. We're working with, we have Coke Hazard as the architect for the project and Stockwell Engineers will be doing the site surveys. The final design blueprints are being drafted, and then we'll be coming to the commission to open up bids for construction services. We'd like to hopefully get these structures on ground probably before the end of the year, so that way we can start getting the connections hooked up to it and ready for, again, when that Motorola equipment comes from Chicago to put inside these structures. The next steps that we're working on is, again, finalizing those agreements, getting those construction bids out for the shelters, and then waiting for the Motorola equipment to come in and stage here until it's ready for installs inside there. So our budget request for this project last September, when you approved the go-ahead for it, was $3.75 million estimate using ARPA funds. We're still confidently on track to stay at or under that budget. We're doing great work internally here, utilizing different vendors that we can have here to make sure we get the appropriate equipment needs fulfilled, but also at the appropriate cost for the county using this approved procurement methods that we are to follow. Anticipated final project completion is approximately March of 2024. I'd say Q1, Q2 of 2024 is when we're hoping to have everything, the antennas on the towers, the shelters in place, equipment in there, turn the lights on, and start having things transmit. But that's kind of the update for the radio tower project. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions from the commission?
I have a comment. if I
Commissioner
may.
Karski.
Great use of one-time funds using the ARPA funds. I think, not only does it support sheriff's office, but as you indicated, the rural fire, rural ambulance, and quite honestly, all of Minnehaha County specifically. I mean, it's scary when you look at the maps, and I know that, it's not like there was a total void of communication, but alternate communication had to be used versus having that portable radio. So, appreciate the update on this, and again, I think it's a great use of one-time funding.
Anyone else? Is there any public comment on this item this morning? Anybody here for public comment on this? All right, seeing none, turn it back over to commission discussion. I would heartily echo Commissioner Karski's comments. I think it was a really good use of the federal money that we were given and will serve a great need. So if there's no other discussion, I'd entertain a motion. Oh, I guess I don't need a motion. We got a briefing. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Some of the slides were really helpful, particularly the coverage slides, so thank you. All right, so that takes us to item 15, which is to consider a motion to authorize the Sheriff's Office Air Guard Division to utilize federal fiscal year 2023 budgeted personnel savings for non-personnel related expenses. Joe Bosman.
For several years now, the Sheriff's Office has contracted with the federal government to provide security services for the South Dakota Air National Guard right here in Sioux Falls using Sheriff's Office personnel. This is a contract that we appreciate having. The federal government also appreciates having our staff out there trained, qualified to alleviate any staffing needs that they have out there. One thing that is, this is a fully reimbursable project, or contract, I should say, with the federal government, whereas all expenses incurred by the county to provide said services is reimbursed through the contract with the federal government. We have a budget put together every year. The budget follows the federal fiscal year, which is not in line with the county because it follows the October through September. So they are coming up to the end of the federal fiscal year, and working with the auditor's office here, we have identified that there was unspent personnel funds for the Air Guard security contract that would be greatly beneficial to utilize for non-personnel expenses. Sadly, some purchasing of ballistic vests that are set to expire for our protection of our staff that are out there. So the request for this follows in line with the county policy that we are allowed to use unspent personnel funds with commission approval for non-personnel expenses. And that is our request now to authorize the Sheriff's Office to utilize these unspent personnel savings for purchasing ballistic vests.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Joe? Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I turn it over to the commission for further discussion or a motion.
I'll move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Kipley.
Aye.
Benega.
Aye.
Karski.
Aye.
Blindberg,
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to item 16, which is authorize the chair to sign the South Dakota Department of Transportation utility and right-of-way certificates for projects MC 21-03 and MC 21-04. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Steve Groen, Highway Superintendent. Excuse me, the first two items are related to some federal bridge replacement dollars that we received a couple of years ago. One is to replace a structure north and east of Corson. The second one is north of Renner. The first action is a requirement from the South Dakota DOT to sign a certificate that assures the DOT that we have acquired all necessary right-of-way and easements for these projects and that they will not be responsible for utility relocation costs. We have acquired all easements and right-of-way, and there will be no utility relocation costs. So we're seeking your approval to sign that certificate.
All right, thank you. Questions for Steve? Anyone for public comment on this item? If not, I turn it over to the commission for further discussion or motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So that takes us to your next item, item 17, which is to authorize the chair to sign the South Dakota DOT letting authorization for projects MC 21-03 and MC 21-04, which you already kind of discussed.
This is the next part of this process. We're on these federally funded bridge replacements. In this program, the DOT handles bid letting and contract administration for these projects. And this action just gives the county's authorization for the DOT to award the bid letting and to the contract administration for these projects.
All right. Any questions for Steve?
I just had one question,
Yes.
Madam Chair. I was just curious, can you define what a box culvert is for those of us who might not know?
It's instead of being a bridge, which would have the abutments on either side and a structure spanning an open area, typically it's a four-sided box that you set into a creek or stream bed. And in these cases, it can be 2 or 3 cells wide. So it's just a different way of building a structure where you'd have, in these cases, a concrete floor where the creek goes through to help with scouring.
Do we have some of these currently in the county?
Yeah, we have several of these. A majority of our township road bridges and some county road bridges that have been replaced in the last several years have all been box culverts.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I turn it back to the commission. Discussion or vote? Motion.
Move approval?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to item 18, which is to approve the request to purchase a tandem axle truck using Minnesota state contract. Steve?
Good morning again. Once again, Steve Groen, Highway Superintendent. Back on July 11th, I was here asking for your approval, which was granted to purchase one Freightliner chassis for a snowplow replacement. At the time, we were unable to get both build slots for this year that were budgeted. We were notified a couple weeks ago by Freightliner that we were able to get the second build slot for this year. So we're asking your permission to go ahead and proceed with purchasing a second chassis for a new snowplow.
All right. Questions for Steve?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Steve, can you just give some background on going through the state of Minnesota and then just for the sake of our meeting packet, why we had about 500 pages worth of documents related to this?
It's all required by the state's attorney's office.
Okay,
All the
that's a good cop-out answer. I'll accept it, but
We use the state of Minnesota contract because there's a couple items like the different types of wheels and other options that we prefer on our trucks that weren't available on the state of South Dakota contract. Plus the price is very favorable compared to the state of South Dakota contract. We are using a local vendor though, iState out of Sioux Falls to purchase these vehicles.
Other questions? Any public comment on this item? If not, entertain a motion.
Move approval?
second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, item 19, authorize the chairperson to sign the professional services agreement with SEH. Steve.
Once again, Steve Groen, Highway Superintendent. In 2021, the South Dakota Legislature passed House Bill 1259, which established the Rural Access Infrastructure Funding Program. We hired SEH in the fall of 2021 to do a survey on all township roads in the county to identify all small structures and large culverts that would qualify for this program. At the time, 29 of these structures, large culverts, were found to be structurally questionable onto their integrity. We talked to the DOT, and we are allowed to use the Rural Access Infrastructure Funds to hire a structural engineer to determine if there should be any load postings or what the structural integrity of these structures are. SEH did the original inspection and inventory and has given us a price that we feel is very fair to perform this additional work.
Commissioner Karski.
Steve, this isn't the same program where I just remember in the past we've had interns come in and that have gone out and inventoried or inspected or all of our structures. This isn't the same thing, is it?
No, the interns come in every few years to inspect our culverts that go underneath the county highways.
Okay.
They're not doing structural analysis, but they aren't working on the township roads. It's just
Okay.
strictly the county culverts, which can be anywhere from 18 inches to 10 feet in diameter.
Thank you.
Other questions for Steve? Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'd turn it
Move
back.
approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you. All right, that takes us to item 20, which is to approve the 2023 Tax Deed Appraisal Board appointments. Yeah, Anderson, our auditor, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, so the tax deed sale is an area that I am learning all about. So I'm here before you today to get approval for our anticipated sale of surplus property. I have to assign on an appraisal board and had a little bit of difficulty finding people to serve on that board, but I did end up finding 3 people to serve and an alternate. And those names are Julianne Talkington, Chris Larson, Cole Heisey, and my alternate is Tana Brummett. And so I am here to ask for your approval to create that board. The purpose of the board, just for a little background, is they will go out along with myself and Jean from my office and equalization will go out and view each property and assess the property. And then the board will put together a report that will be presented back to you, hopefully at the next commission meeting. I just am looking for consideration of approval.
Any questions? Commissioner Karski.
If I may, from my understanding of the statute that creates this board, we have 2 options. We can hire an appraisal, or we can appoint members. I'm trying to remember, and I've looked at it. Is one of the requirements that they be property owners in Minnehaha County?
I guess I don't know the answer to that. I was working with Maggie on this. These are all Minnehaha County residents. If that is a issue, I know Cole Heisey is a renter, but Tana Brummett is a property owner, so I could move Tana into that role. But the rest are definitely property owners in Minnehaha County.
Okay, I'm just curious, maybe moving forward, ship has sailed for this year, but future years, kind of letting us know what the cost would be for an appraisal, to hire an appraiser, one individual. Obviously, it's not going to be voluntary citizen group like this, but I'm just wondering if we're past the stage where we are able to use volunteers like that, and we should probably take a different approach to doing it, so
Sure.
just for your consideration
Oh, yeah.
in future years.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I didn't think to look into hiring an appraiser. When I was able to find volunteers, I thought that would be better use of having the volunteers do it.
okay.
Any other?
I do think you're going to need to go back and look too, because I'm pretty sure the statute
Okay.
does require that they be property owners.
Okay, can we make that change now on? To use my alternate instead of Cole Heisey?
I don't know that it's necessary to do that. If you've got one person who's not qualified, you would have to use your alternate. So I don't know that we need
Okay.
to change this since it's been posted.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions? I'm going to open this for public comment here in a second too.
Madam Chair, just
Mr. Kipley.
one question. Just, you did describe that for some of these volunteer boards, it can be difficult to recruit to, and so this would be broader than just this one issue, but can you describe the efforts and thoughts that went into recruiting and how you settled on how you did come across some volunteers?
Yeah, so first I actually reached out to the board that served in 2021 and asked if they would be interested in serving again. And none of those people were interested in serving this year. So then I reached out to, there was a former equalization employee that I reached out to as well. She did not want to serve on the board. So then my next step was just basically reaching out to people that I knew in my influence circle of friends, trying to find people that I thought would be good qualified people. For instance, Julianne Talkington has a lot of engineering background and is a contractor and has worked on some projects outside of our state, but also housing projects here in South Dakota. Chris Larson is a business owner. So that's kind of the steps that I took, was just trying to find people that I felt would be good educated people that could serve on that board.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone here for public comment on this particular item? All right, seeing none. Any further questions from the commission? I do think that going forward, it probably does make a lot of sense to pursue the option Commissioner Karski talked about, and that might make sense just to get an actual appraiser. The cost would be not significant. And then we'd have, because the role of this board is to really set the value, which will serve as the floor. We aren't able to sell the property for less than that value. So it does play an important role, and it would be, I think that'd be a cost that would make sense in order to get a value by somebody who's really familiar with the real estate market. So, anyone else? Commissioner Benega?
I think it would also be kind of helpful for me, because I don't know all these people, but it would be nice to have an application that we could review to make sure that we understand their backgrounds and what their, frankly, profession is.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. So item 21, resolution to declare certain county-owned property as surplus and authorize appraisal.
Leah from the auditor's office again. So in preparation for the tax deed sale, before you is a resolution which would need to be approved to declare the properties that were transferred to the county due to non-payment of property taxes. And this would be properties where it's been 4 or plus years where the property taxes have not been paid. So these transferred properties need to be declared as surplus so that we can hold a tax deed sale on these properties. And they would be sold at public auction. So the properties are listed on this briefing memo. There's more description in the resolution on these properties.
All right, questions for the auditor? If not, public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment on this item today? Okay.
Thank you so much, Commissioners. My name is Ann Sexer.
I am Sheila Sexer, and she is my daughter.
And we're just here, last week we had met with Chris Swanson and Leah Anderson about property 1804 South Holly Avenue. And we were just here to, if possible, request that that property be removed from the current resolution. Our hope is to finish clearing out the home and then to sell the property. We do have some interested buyers. And it's kind of a long history. I will try to summarize as best and fast as I can, not to belabor, but I do think it needs a background context. And I'll let you sit down.
I can do it.
Okay. She just wanted to make sure she introduced herself too. So the property was home to my uncle and aunt, Edward and Rosemary Hurley. They went by Barney and Rosie. And Barney is my mom's older brother. Rosie, actually my mom's college roommate. And so my mom retired in 2013 from Children's Care Hospital and School as an OT. And the running story in our family is that my Rosemary met my mom in college, and she introduced her to Children's Care because my aunt had cerebral palsy and had gone to what was known as Crippled Children's at the time. So she introduced my mom to her lifelong career. She served there 46 years, and my mom.
Excuse me, I don't want to
Yeah.
be rude, but I want you to know that there is a time
Okay,
limit.
thank you.
So you
Yeah.
really only have about a minute
A
left.
minute. Okay. All right. Well, then I'll hurry. And so anyway, but my mom introduced her to her brother, and so she had a lifelong companion. My aunt was a quadriplegic in her last years in an electric wheelchair. My uncle had congestive heart failure. They didn't live very far from us. When my aunt passed away in 2012, we moved in to take care of my uncle. He was wheelchair bound, and their house is right across from Children's Care Hospital and School. The other properties in the line, most are owned by Bethany. And anyway, we had moved in to just help my uncle. And that's when we found out that they had owed property taxes. They were kind of fiercely independent, took care of what they could. They had home health care costs that they had in their home, so it kind of depleted their savings. My dad and I came and met with Pam Nelson and just kind of told them what we had my uncle wasn't really aware that they were so far behind in property taxes. And so she talked about homesteading. So knowing all that they kind of had gone through homesteading the property. And so that kind of took the burden off.
Your time is up.
Okay.
So if you have, I'll give you just a few more
Okay, to
seconds.
summarize,
But
yeah.
if you, like 5 seconds. So
Okay,
you just
5
need to
seconds.
close it here.
And so just, we've kind of had, my mom and I have had issues along the way. My dad passed away while we were helping my uncle. And so we had issues kind of along the way, taking care of my uncle when he was bedbound and he passed away. And then just moving,
Okay.
clearing out their house.
I think we need to be
Yeah.
done. So thank you very much.
We do have a buyer. We have somebody that's interested. We just need a little bit more time to complete the clearing of the house. So thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. I don't know if the auditor wants to come provide any information about that property, how long the taxes have not been paid.
I asked Chris to come up as well because she has more background on that. But I do know that the taxes are past due since 2009. Other than that,
Do you have other information you think the commission should be aware of? Well, you'd have to come to the mic, Chris, if there's something else.
And Madam Chair, my question for either of them would be, the way the memo reads to us is that the Treasurer's Office has transferred ownership, so I think maybe some of the point that the public commenter might be making actually might be moot, as the ownership is technically already transferred. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Good point.
So I don't need to say.
Okay, thank you. All right.
And then, Madam
Commissioner
Chair, I guess
Kipley.
I would just
Yeah.
make the other general comment, and any of my colleagues from the auditor's or treasurer's office could correct me, but there's also a new U.S. Supreme Court case that has come down that is fairly compassionate on these matters and understands that the government can't just take your property and sell it and keep all of the proceeds. So all we are trying to do is be made whole on the taxes that are owed. So whether it's a buyer that you have lined up participates in the public auction, or someone else gives an even higher bid at an auction, we would just be able to take the amount owed to us, and any excess would go back to the original property owner. So I think in some ways that's facilitating potentially what you're asking for anyway, but that's just, that was something I was going to confirm as well, that we're continuing to follow the new U.S. Supreme Court precedent.
We are, just to relay that, we are waiting on, I guess our plan in visiting with State's Attorney's Office is we would hold those excess funds until there's a determination. I believe we're waiting on some communication from the state as well, but we do recognize that Supreme Court ruling. And so we are aware of that, and we're going to keep those funds separated. But as far as being made whole, it would be the taxes, the interest, and other costs too. So it's not just the taxes, but all of those fees.
Thank you for those clarifications.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Eric Bogue, State's Attorney's Office. Just a little additional background. I appreciate Commissioner Kipley's comments as to the Supreme Court case, but we've had individuals that have had this situation. If you can pay the taxes back prior to the sale and request that the county deeded the property back to you at that point, that is a common precedent, but you would have to actually pay the full amount of the taxes and all the ancillary costs that the auditor has mentioned before that could happen, but otherwise the deed has already been transferred to the county. So,
Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Karski.
What kind of dollar amount are we talking about here?
For their property, it's a little over $40,000.
$40,000, okay. So in reality, we already own this property because of the taxes not being paid for 14 years. Who can access the property?
As far as currently access the property,
Yeah,
I guess if they can clear out the property, they would have access to the property as well.
okay.
You still have access? Yes.
I can see Commissioner Karski's insurance mind working as to
Yeah,
who has
yeah. Just concerned about liability and, yeah, all that other stuff. I mean, if as the auditor, you give them permission, and I don't know if the auditor has that authority or treasurer to access the property to clean it up, make it more saleable, so that if what transpires is, as it discussed, it makes the value that much higher. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but it seems like when you have ownership that, we would have to give permission to access it. So I just hope that coordination is done. So, thank you.
Commissioner Bleinberg.
Thank you. Is there another threshold to get on this list other than, I think you had said 4 years of non-payment, but if we're talking 14 years, did we have to meet a dollar amount or?
No, it's 4+ years. This property was listed, as far as I know, was transferred and listed on a sale previously, but it was not, that sale didn't happen. Is that correct, Chris? Okay. So there was a sale that was supposed to happen in '22 that did not happen. So this property has then been moved out. And I believe also some history that I learned is for this property, when Bob Litz and Pam were in office, that they did give the family some time to try to sell the property. So,
Thank you.
Other questions? So besides the one public comment we received, is there anybody else for public comment? All right, then I turn it back over to the commission and look for a motion.
Would make a motion to approve the tax deed appraisal. I'm sorry, wrong item. the county-owned property and surplus the authorized appraisal.
So motion, is there a second?
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Benega.
Aye.
Blyenberg.
Aye.
Kipley.
Aye.
Karski.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to item 22, which is to authorize the auditor to publish notice of hearing on September 26, 2023, to consider the vacation of a recorded plat. Mason Steffen, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mason Steffen from the County Planning Office. Yes, as explained, this is to set a public hearing for to set a public hearing for a notice for a plat vacation petition. The Minnehaha County Planning Department has received a petition to vacate the plat that's shown on the screen there. The plat was recorded during the reconstruction of Slip Up Creek Road between 476th Avenue and the new South Dakota Highway, or South Dakota Veterans Cemetery. The piece of property described in the H1 lot was never acquired from the landowner, and the landowner is Laurel Ridge Barn, but the plat was still mistakenly filed, and this is a request to vacate that mistakenly filed plat. In accordance with CDCL 11-3-221, a petition to vacate a recorded plat must be heard at a public hearing of the County Commission, and notice of this hearing must be published in the official county newspapers at least 10 days prior to the hearing. So I'll just show exactly where this property is. So this is the access point to the Laurel Ridge Wedding Barn, which goes down here. And this is Slip Up Creek Road, and this is the curve that goes up to the Veterans Cemetery as explained. And I'll just zoom out a little bit here so we can see it. So this is 476th Avenue with Slip Up Creek Road curving up to the Veterans Cemetery with the highway right-of-way plat there. And it's just a little tiny sliver that is currently the part of the driveway for this property. And so this would just vacate it as an H1 lot, and it would go back to the Laurel Ridge Wedding Barn. So the action that should be taken to authorize the auditor to publish notice of a public hearing on the vacation of a recorded plat to be held on September 26, 2023, at or after 9 a.m. at the meeting of the Minnehaha County Commission. And if you have any questions for me, I'm available.
Questions for Mason? Commissioner Blyenberger.
Thank you. What does the H stand for?
So it's a highway platted lot. So H lots are for highway right-of-way. So typically the highway department or another entity that's doing highway reconstruction will plat them for additional right-of-way. So a typical highway will have a 100-foot right-of-way, 50 feet on each side of the line, and an H lot is typically additional right-of-way beyond that that is needed. In this case, when they redid the curve, that entire H lot, you can see they did more over here, which was actually obtained and will remain in place. They platted these for more right-of-way when this curve was going to be in place, but they ended up not actually acquiring that property from the property owner, but it was still filed. So that is why this one's being removed.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Anyone here for public comment on this item? Seeing none, I turn it over to the commission
Madam
for,
Chair, I'd make a motion to authorize the auditor to publish a notice of hearing for September 26th.
I'll second that.
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, so this is our opportunity for public comment for, this is for folks who would like to speak about something that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here today who'd like to speak about something that is not on the agenda?
Hi, good morning. I didn't have this on the agenda, so I'd like to use some public comment time. I know Steve has done this in the past. I just wanted to give kudos to my staff. So 5 months ago when I started as auditor, my staff was concerned because there was rumors that I was going to let everyone go. And they stuck it out, and I wasn't planning to do that. And my staff has been great. And I think we've all been pleasantly surprised at how well we all work together. So recently, without an elections coordinator, since July 7th, there's certain staff in my office that have really stepped up to the plate to along with myself filling in and taking care of all those daily duties that the election coordinator usually takes care of. And that includes processing hundreds of voter registrations and updates. And so we've had a really good teamwork approach, and it's really led us into good conversation about how we will be approaching the 24 election. And I'm just really proud of the staff. I also wanted to take this moment. Today was the first day of our new elections coordinator, Mike Mathis, and he comes to us with an accounting degree and experience in project management through his time at Tyler Technologies and Fiserv. So he has great qualifications, and I expect him to hit the ground running. We have some projects that we will be working on for precinct boundary updates. Our voter list maintenance, we're still in the process of doing that. And then also learning what a post-election audit is going to look like. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank my staff and to welcome Mike.
Great, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing none. Commissioner liaison reports. Any liaison reports this morning? Commissioner Benega?
Well, I had a Housing and Redevelopment Commission meeting, and we spent some time going through some line items, but we didn't have enough attendance, so we didn't vote on any of it. So we were active but inactive.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, just a couple updates from my areas. We had a planning and zoning meeting last Monday where I think at least one of the conditional use permits was going to be appealed. I know the Muller pallets issue has been getting a lot of attention in the community, and I think we had a lot of great feedback from the community at that hearing. That conditional use permit was voted down by a vote of 3-2. So I think there's still a lot of issues to be worked out there. My best understanding now is Muller Pallets has taken out another application for a conditional use permit for a different location. So I think we're gonna want to use our procedural posture as best we can to consolidate those issues, and I think one might be self-evidently a better location than another. So that will be coming down the pike to us in September, possibly flowing over to October if we go for a different location, as that will have to go through the September planning and zoning meeting. And then just a brief update. I don't know if Steve left. Steve's still here from the highway department. Last week we had another long-term employee at the highway department retire at 26 years of service, and I think a couple months back we had somebody that was at about 35 years of service. So just kind of a note that we're losing some institutional knowledge of some long-time highway employees. But I know I've had some good discussions with Steve Groen, our highway superintendent, about some new hires and even some success with seasonal staff this summer, that we've got some new people coming in as well. So a little bit of turnover, so kind of a bittersweet moment down at the highway department with some turnover of some long-term staff, but also excited about some new people coming in. So I think that's all I had for today.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none. Any non-action commission discussion? All right, we do have an executive session today, so I would entertain a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we're now going to go into executive session. Why don't we try to be in there by 10:15? Thank you.